At my graduation party, my mom slapped me across the face and screamed, "You think you're better than us!" She didn't care who was watching. She didn't care that my colleagues from work were there, or that my name had just been called with honors. She didn't even care that her hand left a mark that lasted for hours. What she cared about was that I no longer needed her, that I had made it out, that I had dared to grow without her permission. I stood there frozen, holding a glass of sparkling cider in front of nearly 40 people. Some turned away, some just stared. Nobody said a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. I didn't throw anything. I looked her in the eyes and stepped back. That moment, one sharp sound in the middle of a warm afternoon, split my life into two parts. Before, when I kept shrinking to make room for her shadow, and after, when I finally let the silence speak louder than blood. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't answer her calls. I went to my apartment, packed a small bag, and sat in the dark. My hands were still trembling, but my heart wasn't. I knew something had changed. I had changed. At midnight, I opened my laptop and did something I had only ever imagined in my mind. I started the paperwork to legally change my last name. And that wasn't all. I revoked the auto deposit that had been sending her money every month for the past 2 years. I canceled the joint cell phone plan she'd insisted we keep, and I blocked her number. That was the night I stopped being her daughter in name. I became something else. Free. My name is Ava Collins, or at least that's what it used to be. I was born in a small Rust Belt town in Ohio, the middle child of 3, and the only one who ever made it out. My mom, Diane, was a nurse assistant who never wanted more than what she already had. My dad, Rick, worked construction until his back gave out when I was 12, and after that, he mostly just stayed home quiet and tired. My older brother, Sean, dropped out of high school and moved into the basement when he was 19. My younger sister, Lily, got pregnant at 17 and left the house at 18. That left me, the smart one, the good girl. The one who followed the rules, got the grades, brought home certificates, and never asked for too much. My mom never praised me, not really. When I got accepted into college on a full scholarship, she said, "Don't let it make you think you're better than us." When I graduated undergrad and landed a job at a mid-tier tech firm, she asked, "So when are you going to come back home and help your family?" Every time I achieved something, it was met with suspicion, with bitterness, with the kind of hostility that didn't match the moment. I used to think she was just tired, overworked, maybe even jealous. But over time, I realized the truth was deeper. She couldn't stand that I wasn't dependent on her. She couldn't handle the fact that I had carved out an identity beyond what she could control. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to have locked doors. I wasn't allowed to go to sleepovers. I had to show her my texts, my passwords, my plans. She called it safety. I now know it was surveillance. I was 17 the first time she slapped me across the face for talking back, which meant saying no. I was 20 when she threw a mug at the wall because I told her I didn't want to send money home that month. "You owe us," she said. "We raised you." At 23, I secretly moved to Chicago for grad school and told her I was only gone for a job. Every call became a performance. I lied about my schedule. I pretended to still live an hour away. I kept up the illusion because I was afraid of her rage, her guilt trips, her silence. When I got a promotion at work and began making more than she ever had, I sent her money. Not out of love, out of habit, out of fear that if I didn't, she'd find a way to punish me. I supported Sean when he got into trouble, paid off Lily's hospital bill when her baby was born without insurance, and I never told anyone how hard it was to breathe under the weight of being the only one they leaned on, while being the only one they never clapped for. For years, I believed I was the problem. I thought if I just worked harder, called more often, gave more, smiled more, they'd finally see me as worthy. But it never came. I was the golden child when they needed money, the invisible one when I needed kindness, the punching bag when they were angry, and the villain when I finally said no. My mom had a way of twisting things until I didn't recognize what was real. If I cried, she said I was manipulative. If I asked for space, she said I was selfish. If I dared to be proud, she said I was arrogant. It wasn't until I met June that I realized what I was living through wasn't love. It was control. It was emotional quicksand, and I had been sinking slowly my whole life. June was the first person who didn't flinch when I told the truth. She didn't say, "But she's still your mom." She said, "What she's doing is abuse." And for the first time, I believed it. Because naming it meant I could fight it. And fighting it meant I could leave. And leaving meant I could live. There's a kind of violence that doesn't leave bruises. A kind that creeps in through daily life wearing the mask of love. That was my mother's favorite weapon, emotional warfare dressed as concern. I remember being 10 years old standing in the kitchen while she rifled through my backpack. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd gotten an A on a science quiz, and she wanted to know if I was hiding something. "You're slipping," she said, holding the paper up like it was evidence. "You think that's going to get you anywhere?" When I turned away, she grabbed my arm too tight. "Don't walk away from me when I'm teaching you." That was her language control spoken in correction, intimidation disguised as instruction. As I got older, it got worse. She installed a GPS app on my phone when I was 16 and said it was just for emergencies. When I disabled it before going to a sleepover, she showed up at the house unannounced, pulled me out by the wrist, and screamed at the host parents that they were corrupting me. She told me later that night, "You're mine, not theirs. And don't you ever forget that." My dad said nothing. He always said nothing. He would drink a Diet Coke in the living room, glance up for a second, then look back at the television like he was watching someone else's life. He never stepped in. Not when she called me names. Not when she slammed my laptop shut mid-essay because I hadn't cleaned the bathroom. Not when she locked me out after I came home 30 minutes late from work. "He just doesn't want conflict," my mom would say. But what she meant was he didn't want to stop her. In college, even from hundreds of miles away, she found ways to reach through the distance. She would text every day. "Did you eat? Why haven't you called? Don't forget we sacrificed everything for you." When I took longer than usual to respond, she'd send guilt in paragraphs. When I ignored it, she'd send threats. "Maybe you don't need us anymore. Maybe we'll stop answering when you finally do call." And then, like clockwork, she'd soften. "I just miss you. You're still my baby." That push and pull, that exhausting emotional yo-yo kept me in line for years. It wasn't until I started therapy in grad school that I saw the pattern, the cycle, the trap. It wasn't about love. It was about possession. She wanted me small, manageable, submissive. And when I started growing out of the box she'd built for me, she panicked. Every choice I made that didn't center her felt like betrayal, like rebellion, like war. When I turned down a job near home, she said, "You're abandoning your family." When I didn't answer her FaceTime call during a work meeting, she sent 10 messages and called me cold. "You've changed," she said. "You used to be sweet." Sweet to her meant available. It meant guilty. It meant never saying no. I remember one time my brother Sean got into trouble with the law, some nonsense about unpaid parking tickets. This spiraled into a court date. She called me at 11 p.m., demanded I send $600 by the morning. I was in the middle of finals. When I told her I didn't have it, she said, "You're selfish. You have a degree and a good job, and you're gonna let your brother suffer." I caved. I sent the money. He never thanked me. I covered Lily's rent for 3 months after her boyfriend left. I bought my dad's prescription when his insurance lapsed. I filled in all the financial cracks in a house that had never made room for me. And still none of it counted. I was still the villain for not doing more, for not being available, for living a life she couldn't control. My therapist called it parentification, the act of turning a child into the emotional or financial caregiver. I called it my normal, because when you grow up in a house like that, chaos becomes familiar. You learn to anticipate the anger before it arrives. You learn to swallow your own joy to keep someone else from feeling small. You learn to disappear. And I disappeared so well, I almost forgot I existed. I wore their shame like a second skin. I covered my success in apology. I downplayed my promotions, skipped sharing good news, edited myself into something quieter, something less offensive, something acceptable. Until one day I woke up and realized I couldn't breathe. Not metaphorically. I was sitting in my apartment staring at my computer, and my chest physically hurt, like my lungs had run out of space. like all the invisible weight I'd been carrying had finally become too heavy to ignore. That's when June found me. She didn't say cheer up. She said, "You don't deserve this." And those words were like oxygen, because nobody had ever said that before. Not to me, not without an agenda. And in that moment, something shifted. I stopped thinking of survival as gratitude. I stopped believing that being born into a family meant I had to stay loyal to pain. And I started planning a life beyond the people who claimed to love me while crushing me at the same time. The day of the graduation party started quietly. The sky was soft and overcast, the kind of weather that feels like a blank page. I had booked the backyard space of a small cafe in Lincoln Park. Nothing fancy, just strings of lights, folding chairs, a buffet table, and soft jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't meant to be a spectacle. It was meant to be a moment, a marker of years spent working full-time while getting my MBA part-time. A celebration of 3 a.m. study nights weekends, sacrificed relationships lost, and a woman rebuilt. I had invited people who knew the story. My coworkers, my friends from grad school, my therapist, even my barista from the cafe near campus, who always slipped me an extra espresso shot during finals. The invitation did not include my family. I had made peace with that, or so I thought. But I should have known better. I should have known she wouldn't stay away. Around 5:15 p.m., 30 minutes after the party started, I saw her, Diane, my mother. She arrived in a black velvet dress and heels far too high for the lawn, flanked by my brother Sean, who looked bored and underdressed in a hoodie and jeans. She didn't smile, didn't greet anyone. She walked past the welcome table like she belonged there and went straight to the food. June saw her first. She touched my elbow and whispered, "She's here." I froze for a second, plate in hand, heart tightening. "Do you want me to ask her to leave?" June offered. I shook my head. Not yet. Maybe she'd just sit quietly. Maybe she'd behave. I kept talking to my guest, laughing through the tension in my chest, refusing to let her hijack another one of my moments. But I was naive. Because 30 minutes later, when it came time for me to give a short speech, it all fell apart. I stood near the center of the yard, glass of cider in hand, and began. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "This degree isn't just a piece of paper. It's a symbol of every silent battle fought and won. It's for every night I thought I wouldn't make it, and every person who reminded me that I could." I glanced at June, then continued. "Most of all, this is proof that we get to write our own endings, that we don't have to stay in the roles we were assigned." That's when it happened. A sharp sound of heels clicking on concrete. I turned my head, and there she was walking toward me, drink in hand, eyes hard. My mother. She stopped 5 feet away, lifted her glass and said loudly, "So now you're better than us?" The crowd went silent. I didn't answer. I just blinked. And that's when she did it. She stepped forward, raised her hand, and slapped me. Hard. So hard that the glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the grass. "You think you're better than us because you learned how to talk pretty," she shouted. "Because you got your little paper. You forgot where you came from." The air vanished from the yard. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Is this real?" Sean didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at his phone. My hands shook, not from pain, but from disbelief. Even for her, this was new. Public, violent, loud, and still I didn't speak. I looked at her, not through her, at her. And then I turned, walked back into the cafe without saying a single word. The crowd stood still, unsure of what to do. June followed me inside. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer cliches. She simply placed her hand on my back and said, "I'm here." We stayed there inside for 20 minutes. When I came back out, my mother was gone, Sean too. The mood never fully recovered. People tried to dance. The jazz played again. But the air had changed. The memory had already stained the night. I smiled, hugged people goodbye, thanked them for coming. And when the last guest left, I stood in the empty yard, stared at the broken glass still glinting in the grass, and whispered, "Never again." That was the last time she touched me. The last time she would have that kind of power. Because the next morning I started rewriting everything. Not with rage, but with boundaries. with silence, with legal forms and revoked permissions. That moment at the party didn't break me, it clarified me. And in that clarity, I found a new kind of strength, the kind that doesn't ask for permission to exist, the kind that doesn't tremble under a mother's voice, the kind that finally says enough. That night, after everyone had left after the last folding chair had been packed away and the string lights unplugged, I sat on my couch in silence. June brought me tea, but I didn't drink it. I stared at my laptop, heart strangely calm, like my body had decided it was done trembling. I opened the browser and logged into my bank account first. For the past 2 years, I had set up an automatic transfer of $350 every month to my mom's checking account. It was never acknowledged, except when it didn't come on time. I canceled it, no warning, no explanation, just a quiet click. Next, I pulled up my phone plan account. My mother, Sean, and even Lily were still on the family plan I paid for. I removed all three. Then I checked the small savings account I had opened in my mother's name the year my dad's unemployment benefits ran out. I had been depositing $25 a week trying to build something in case of emergencies. I drained it, closed it, and moved the funds to a new account with only my name. Then I went to the state's legal website and downloaded the form to begin a name change petition. Ava Collins would soon be no more. I chose a name that felt like mine. Not inherited, not forced, not branded by trauma. Hartley. Ava Hartley. My grandmother's maiden name. She died when I was 11, the only person who ever told me I was allowed to want more. I chose her name because it felt like stepping toward the version of me she believed in. I filled out the form, signed it, and uploaded it into the system. Then I logged off. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel like a daughter or a traitor or a savior. I just felt clean. And that feeling, that startling, grounding sense of clarity stayed with me through the night. The next morning, my phone buzzed. 4 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Sean, a voicemail from Lily that said, "What the hell did you do?" I didn't answer any of them. June watched me put the phone face down and said, "You don't owe them a reaction." I nodded. That day I went to work like normal. I answered emails, I ate lunch. I finished a proposal for a health tech startup we were trying to onboard. I didn't mention what happened. Not yet. That evening, as June and I sat on the couch watching a cooking show, my phone lit up again. A single message from my mom. "You've made your point. Now fix it." I didn't reply. I deleted it. That weekend, I changed all my passwords, removed every emergency contact, called my credit card company and asked them to take my mother off the authorized user list. I cleaned my life like scrubbing a wound, not to erase the scar, but to let it heal without infection. And through all of it, I said nothing. No speeches, no angry texts, no explanations, just action, just boundaries, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from fear, but from decision, from resolve, from knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop allowing access to your time, your energy, your name, your money, your heart. I didn't retaliate. I reclaimed, not out of hate, but because love had been weaponized against me for so long, it no longer felt like love. It felt like debt, and I was done paying. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No banging on my door, no ambushes at work, just a string of calls that I didn't answer, and a few emails that I deleted without opening. For the first time in years, my mornings weren't dictated by dread. I woke up without the sinking feeling that I had forgotten something, missed, something failed someone. June and I started going on walks in the evening. Nothing dramatic, just 20-minute strolls around the neighborhood where we didn't talk about them. We talked about us, about the garden we wanted to build, the trip to Vancouver we'd postponed 3 times, her plans to start her own firm. I was learning to live without flinching. But the silence didn't last. My mom escalated. She started calling from different numbers, blocked numbers. She emailed me from a new address. "Family is forever," one subject line read. Another simply said, "ungrateful." Then came the messages from my dad, shorter, more restrained. "Can't you just call her?" he wrote. "She's not well." I didn't reply. Then Sean sent a voice note. I didn't listen to it. I forwarded it to June, who did. She told me it was mostly cursing something about how I thought I was too good for the rest of them, how money had made me arrogant. He ended it with, "She's your mother. Act like it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it all was, as if all my value was wrapped in what I gave, as if my refusal to be drained was a betrayal. Then Lily called June. Not me, June. She left a voicemail that started with, "I don't want to get in the middle," but that's exactly what she was doing. She said Mom hadn't stopped crying, that she'd stopped eating, that I was killing her, that the least I could do was apologize. June didn't respond. She played the message for me, and I sat there dry-eyed, unmoved. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that none of this was love. It was leverage, and I was done being leveraged. That week, I wrote a letter, not to send, just to write. It started with, "I love you, but I don't owe you my peace, not anymore." I folded it and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. That same day, I got a notification from the court system. My name change was approved. Ava Hartley, legally, permanently, mine. I stared at the document for a long time, not because I doubted it, but because it felt like closing a door that had never been mine to open. That night, June poured 2 glasses of wine. We sat on the balcony in the cool air, the city lights flickering in the distance. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like I'm finally breathing air I didn't have to earn," I said. She smiled and reached for my hand. The phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was. And I already knew I wasn't answering. Not now. Not ever. A week passed. Then 2. The silence stretched just long enough for me to think maybe, just maybe, it was over. But I should have known better. The next hit didn't come through phone calls or emails. It came through social media. June was the one who found it first. She walked into the living room, holding her phone, with that tight, unreadable look she gets when she's deciding how much truth I can handle. "You need to see this," she said, and handed me her screen. There it was, a TikTok account under the name @StrongMomTruths. The profile photo was unmistakably my mother, hair curled, makeup done, eyes full of stage sorrow. The bio read, "Survivor, fighter, mother of 3, sharing my truth one day at a time." I clicked the first video. It was her sitting in our old kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug. Piano music played softly in the background. She looked straight into the camera and said, "Sometimes the ones you love most are the first to turn their backs on you. I gave everything to my daughter, sacrificed dreams, nights, meals, and now I don't even get a phone call." I stared at the screen, speechless. The comments were already flooding in. "You're so strong. I relate to this so much. Ungrateful kids are a curse." Over 100,000 views in 2 days. More videos followed, more stories all carefully curated. She never used my name, but it didn't matter. She didn't need to. The narrative was clear. Poor mother abandoned by her cold, successful daughter. One clip had over 300,000 views. In it, she said it's funny how success makes people forget who raised them. June kept asking, "Do you want to report it?" But I didn't. I just watched. Not out of masochism, but because I needed to see just how far she would go. One day she went live. Thousands of people watched her cry on command, read fake texts, hint at abuse, and nod as strangers called me cruel. She told one commenter, "She's not a bad person, just lost in a world that tells her money is more important than family." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't make my own video to defend myself. I knew what that would do. I knew she wanted the attention, the reaction, the drama. But this wasn't my first lesson in emotional warfare. And I wasn't going to play the game. June kept an eye on the account. Every video, every comment, every trend she tried to hop on. My mother was chasing virality now. And for a while she got it. But no truth lasts long when it's built on a lie. And I had something she didn't: receipts, proof, clarity, time, and the resolve to wait. Because eventually the curtain would fall. They always do. especially when they're pulled up by hands that mistake performance for power. The twist didn't come with fireworks. It arrived quietly through an unexpected email from a national nonprofit for women in tech. Subject line: keynote invitation, fall conference. I blinked at it thinking it was a mistake. But it wasn't. They had seen my LinkedIn post, a short paragraph I'd written after graduation, about resilience and building boundaries in both work and life. Somehow it had made its way to their event coordinator. They wanted me to speak, not just on stage, but to close out the conference. Me, Ava Hartley. I hesitated at first. The voice in my head, still wearing my mother's tone, whispered, "Who do you think you are?" But I pushed through it. I said yes. I wrote the speech carefully, word by word, pouring in the truth I had never been allowed to say out loud. I talked about growing up in an environment where silence was the only acceptable emotion, where love came with strings, where obligation was confused with loyalty. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Didn't need. The room was full of people who already understood. I ended with one line that came to me at 3 a.m. the night before. Sometimes survival means leaving behind the people who taught you how to survive, because they never intended for you to thrive. The speech was recorded. It went viral. Over 2 million views in 5 days. News outlets picked it up. Blogs quoted it. Women, hundreds of them, wrote me messages saying, "You told my story." Then came the sponsorship offers, mental health apps, book agents, a startup accelerator for female founders. My inbox transformed into a door I had never known was possible to open. Meanwhile, my mother's TikTok account started to shift. The comments turned. People began linking to my speech in her videos. One wrote, "Is this the daughter you're talking about? Because she sounds like she finally found peace." Engagement dropped, views slowed, the likes dried up. And then one day the account was gone, deleted, no warning, no goodbye, just disappeared. June and I watched it unfold in silence. She didn't say "told you so." She just passed me the remote and said, "Your turn to choose what we watch tonight." And for the first time in forever, I felt what power truly meant. Not noise, not retaliation, just truth delivered on my terms. Quiet, direct, unshakable. The kind of power that doesn't ask for attention. It simply stands. It wasn't long before the silence from my mother turned into something more strategic. One Sunday evening, just as June and I were setting the table for dinner, my phone lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Can we talk?" No drama, just conversation. "I think you'd be proud of me." It was signed Mom. I stared at it for a long time. Proud? Proud of what? Of the public shaming of the smear campaign, of years spent making me feel like I was a burden she regretted. June read over my shoulder. "She's setting a trap," she said quietly. I agreed, but part of me was still that child hoping for a soft place to land. So I replied 5 words only: "June will be there too." She never wrote back, but I knew that wasn't the end. 3 days later, my parents showed up at our apartment. No warning, just a knock on the door at 6:45 p.m. June peeked through the peephole, then looked at me. "It's them." I opened the door halfway. My dad smiled like it was just a surprise visit. My mom stood behind him, arms folded, lips tight. "We just want to talk," he said. 3 minutes, I replied. They walked in without waiting. June stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed. My mom started first, always the orchestrator. She talked about how families go through hard times, about forgiveness, about the bond that can't be broken. Then she dropped the line that made everything click. "She's moved back in with us," she said, like it was nothing, just until she gets her footing again. So that was the truth. They had taken her back, paid the tuition I had refused to, let her into the house I had been pushed out of. And now they were here not to reconcile, but to manage, to make sure I didn't embarrass them further, to silence me. My dad added, "She regrets what she did." I asked, "Did she say that? Or are you just hoping I'll believe it?" They didn't answer. My mom said, "She's still your sister," I said, "and you're still enabling her." Then I asked the question that settled everything. "Did either of you ever tell her what she did at my graduation was wrong?" Silence. My mom looked at the floor. My dad sighed. "She was overwhelmed," he said. "She didn't mean to ruin it." That was all I needed to hear. They weren't angry at her. They were embarrassed. And the easiest way to erase embarrassment was to push it onto me, the one who walked away. I told them I was done. With the money, with the guilt, with the role I never asked for. I said, "You raised a daughter who believes consequences don't apply to her. And now you're shocked she keeps hurting people." I pointed to the door. "You can go." They hesitated. My mom opened her mouth like she wanted to deliver one final blow, but nothing came out. They left, quietly. And with them, something else left too. The last thread. The last illusion that I could fix this. That night, I logged into the IRS website and removed them as dependents on my financial documents. I unlinked every account, filed final paperwork for a private trust I had set up in my new name. Every tie, every invisible chain, they were gone. The next morning, June and I walked to the coffee shop around the corner. I ordered something new. She held my hand. "So what now?" she asked. I took a breath, one that didn't catch in my throat. "Now we live." And we did. For the first time, freely, quietly, fully mine. We moved out of the apartment a few months later. June found a small house just outside the city with a porch big enough for 2 chairs and a view of nothing but trees. No noise, no buzz of traffic, just stillness, the kind that doesn't ask for explanation. We painted the walls ourselves. We planted herbs in small pots. We learned the names of the birds that nested near the window. And we never spoke about my family, not because it hurt too much, but because it no longer felt necessary. That chapter had closed itself. Occasionally, we'd hear updates from mutual acquaintances. My mother had started volunteering at church again. Sean got engaged to someone he'd only known 3 months. Lily moved back home. They all lived in the same orbit, just without me. One evening, we sat on the porch with glasses of wine. The sun was slipping behind the trees, and a soft breeze stirred the wind chimes. June asked, "Do you think they'll ever admit it?" I didn't need clarification. I knew exactly who she meant. I shook my head. No. But I think they know. Not in a way they can speak aloud, but in that quiet place they avoid when they're alone. They know I was always the one picking up the pieces, and they know why I stopped. She nodded, took a sip of wine, and said nothing more, because really there was nothing left to say. A few weeks later, I received a letter. No return address. Just a handwritten note inside that read, "I forgive you. I hope you can forgive me too." No name. But I knew the handwriting. I didn't respond. I burned it. Not out of anger, but as ritual, as release. I watched the paper curl and disappear, the smoke rising like a final goodbye. The podcast she started never returned. The sponsors dropped. The followers moved on. Truth has a way of surviving trend cycles, and lies, no matter how loud, eventually starve without attention. Life settled into something beautifully uneventful. Mornings with coffee and soft playlists. Afternoons with work that didn't drain me. Evenings where silence meant peace, not punishment. I changed my phone number. I deleted old backups. I kept one photo, just one of me as a child on my grandmother's lap, because that version of me deserved to be remembered. Everything else went. Sometimes I sit on the porch and try to recall the exact moment when I stopped being theirs. I think it was the slap. Or maybe it was long before that. Maybe it was the first time I was told I was too much, too loud, too proud. Either way, I'm not theirs anymore. And I don't carry that as a wound. I carry it as proof. Proof that it's possible to outgrow the people who raised you. That it's okay to walk away even if they don't understand why. That forgiveness doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness is choosing not to carry their damage into your new life. And that's what I've done. I no longer measure love by how much I'm willing to lose myself. I no longer confuse silence with safety. I no longer mistake obligation for loyalty. And when I look at June, her hands, her steadiness, her quiet commitment, I understand what it means to be seen without being controlled, what it means to belong without being owned. We talk about building something together. A practice, a book, a family maybe. One built not from tradition, but from intention, from healing, from truth. Because the life I live now isn't perfect, but it's honest. And that makes all the difference. The last message I ever received from my mother was a single emoji, just a flame. No words, no explanation. I showed it to June. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me and said, "Let it burn." And I did. I blocked the number. Not out of anger, but because some fires aren't meant to be fought. They're meant to be left behind, to die on their own. So you can walk away, finally warm, finally free.